Okay, welcome to another edition of the Deals for Dentists podcast. And today we are joined by Austin Hare, and he's zooming in from Orlando, Florida. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, down here in Orlando.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Austin is partner at Leaders Real Estate and also Real Estate University. And you can go to Deals for Dentists and find his promo offer, which is a free vulnerability analysis. So, Austin, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, man. My pleasure to be here.
So actually, let's jump into, can you explain what a free vulnerability analysis is?
Sure. So let's just say you've got a location or a handful of locations and you are not sure about if it was the best spot or it's the right spot, or maybe you're just curious like how the performance is. So what we would essentially do is just go in and take a look around at all of the demographic data. Okay, compile as much data as we can, analyzing the competition. So we'll do a deep dive into that. We just look at daytime population, drive-by population. We also would gather some information about what specific field of dentistry you're in, and use that to help us do a competitive analysis. And then just decide like, okay, you've got some weaknesses that you have to overcome, and you don't have to move your location per se. You could offset that by increasing your marketing dollars. But if you're at the end of a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease, maybe you're thinking about relocating, or maybe you're looking at another spot, and you want to just know the demographic data around that, then that's kind of what that vulnerability analysis is about.
Okay. And is that, that's performed by Leaders Real Estate, which you're a partner of?
Yep. Yeah. It's performed by our team here.
Okay. Now, can you explain, so you have Leaders Real Estate and you also have Real Estate University. Can you explain both of those?
Sure. Yeah. Real Estate University is a nonprofit that we started specifically for commercial real estate, and with a focus and an emphasis on healthcare. So that could be dental or ophthalmology or optometry or dermatology or whatever. And so we just want to go through and kind of help educate people on, everything from like the very beginning, like step one, all the way down to like, so there's topics such as renting versus buying, what's more beneficial, how to learn about what is a cap rate, like a capitalization rate, a lot of stuff about negotiation. There's a lot of good content in there. And then the Leaders Real Estate, that's our actual business. That's what we do. That's how we make our bread and butter. And that would be for people who are ready. Like, maybe you already know a little bit about it, or maybe you just know that you need to do a transaction. Maybe it's a acquisition of a building, or maybe it's just you want to sign a lease, like relocate somewhere. Maybe you have a building you want to sell, whatever that is. Like that's where Leaders Real Estate would come into play.
So would you recommend someone that isn't that experienced, which a lot of dentists aren't? I mean, we kind of come out of dental school knowing how to do fillings and crowns, but they don't teach you anything about business or real estate. Would you recommend to go to the Real Estate University, learn as much as you can, and then call you as far as moving forward with?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So Real Estate University is definitely a good starting point. And you can go, if you go to the podcast, the content is organized pretty well in there too. And you can just kind of scroll through until you see something that resonates with you. Like, there's a lot of interviews that we've done on there and stuff, but a lot of the educational component was done earlier on. And so you can scroll down, we have a whole series, about 9 different podcasts on negotiation, that was based off Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. So instead of spending 6 hours reading the book, you might be able to spend, 2 hours getting so it's not like the cliff notes, it's kind of like in between. There's also things like where it just talks about, like we said earlier, buying versus renting your building. We talk about, or rather the building for your business. A lot of it, a couple of our episodes are on demographics too, competition evaluation, psychographic data, stuff like that. So yeah, that's definitely a great spot to get started, kind of sink your teeth in a little bit and learn as much as you can on your own. And then you have a good base. You know what data to look for when you're ready to make a decision, make a transaction, make it, an important call like that.
What's the name of your podcast?
It's called Commercial Real Estate Secrets. And so it's kind of, it's all connected with our Real Estate University. It's all like the same thing. So like our Commercial Real Estate Secrets podcast is posted on Real Estate University. And so, you can just go there and then you can click and you can go find the podcast, find the episodes, that sort of thing.
Okay. So Austin, you're like,
I feel like I'm overwhelming. I feel like I'm overwhelming people. It's really simple. Yeah. realestateuniversity.org, like, or runiversity.org has like a ton of great content.
Yeah, I mean, it's nowadays it's all about the content people want. They want a podcast. They want to be able to go on the website and look at videos or webinars. But what I was just about to say is that you're like the classic story that I've heard a million times. And if I had a nickel for every time I heard your story, which is going from professional wakeboarder to American Ninja Warrior to dental real estate expert, I would have 5 cents. So uh, tell me about your journey. So you were a wakeboarder, a ninja warrior, which is super popular in my house. My kids love
Oh, that's
American
awesome.
Ninja Warrior, so they're
And
gonna think I'm.
I want to clarify, I've never been on the show, but I would like to be on the show at some point. But um, yeah, so I started wakeboarding at a young age when I was like 12 years old, and just went full on into that. And so did that professionally for like 12 years. So and I retired back in 2017, and it was great. I mean, I got to travel the world, and it was like a fun job. It keeps you fit. It gets you do a lot of traveling. You get to see a lot of cool things. And so back in 2000, and I was juggling college at the same time. And so then when I graduated college, I was kind of looking for some other things to do because I like biting off more than I can chew. And I started doing or I bought some residential real estate, it was called house hacking. So I bought a house, I lived in part of it, I rented out the other part, and then I opened up some gyms, some fitness centers. And so I ended up, when I moved out of that house, I kept it. I bought another duplex that I lived at, and then that turned me on into Airbnb. And so I was kind of wakeboarding, running 3 gyms, and then Airbnb my properties all at the same time, and it was crazy. And so I decided to sell the gyms, but keep the Airbnbs. And I had been investing in commercial real estate along the way. So, you know, like when I first bought the house, it was 2011, and it was just honestly very, very lucky timing. I mean, I just happened to be at the age and the point in my career where I was looking to make a residential real estate investment. I didn't know that it was going to be the bottom of the market all time, like right after the housing crash, right? Especially in Orlando, it was hit really hard. So I got it for a great deal. And that just set me up really nicely to continue compounding on that path. And so later, I had a wakeboarding buddy who he was getting into commercial real estate, and he had some investment opportunities as well. And so I started investing with him on the commercial real estate side, and the returns were really good. And so it was actually a medical marijuana like building, but we didn't know that at the time. So he had a bunch of cash that he was sitting on. He bought a building because it was a great deal. He couldn't secure the bank financing in time. And then after he bought it, people that were medical marijuana tenants started reaching out to him and saying like, "Hey, we're interested in this." And it's like, "Oh, this is like a whole industry like we had no idea about." And so I invested with him so that we could buy the building, and then we were able to secure a tenant in there. This was like probably 2018, and then we were able to refinance that building, so pull most of our money back, put that into a different project, and then now a couple years later, there's already offers on the building that we thought it would take till 2023 to get the market to stabilize, but at the end of 2020, we had a total of 3 investments. One of them sold, and now a second one is on the table. So that one just ended up being really, really well. And so along that process, my eyes are really opened up to commercial real estate because I was like, you know what? Like residential real estate is great. It's a great starting point. You don't need a whole lot of capital. You can leverage it a lot. Like, banks typically trust you to get the money to buy commercial or residential real estate because you're probably going to live there at least for a point, right? And just in general, it's a lot easier. However, at some point it stops being able to scale because $100,000 house might rent out for $1,000 a month, but $1 million house is not going to rent out for $10,000 a month. You know what I mean? And so that's why commercial real estate was so appealing to me. So I met my partner, like probably in end of 2017, early 2018, and he invited me to go to a Tony Robbins event. And I was like, yeah, like I don't know anything about the guy. Sure. So we went to business mastery together, and we just hit it off, and we learned so much along the way. And so then I still had my gyms. I was pretty full time. I wasn't looking to get into real estate full time. A side hustle for me. But as I started to kind of, I was getting a little bit burned out on the fitness industry. It was a constant grind. And so I sold all my gyms in 2019, thankfully. And so it was like middle of 2019 when I started selling and transitioning out, we started being like, okay, you've got this set of life experiences from all the things that you've done, like in the B2C world, the fitness world and all this, and, everything else. And then he's got his set of experiences, which is specifically like healthcare, retail, like retail healthcare. It's like helping healthcare offices transition from like office traditionally to retail. And so then we just combine forces, and it's been going really well.
So you have like this ability with great timing. So you actually sold your gyms pre-COVID. I mean, that is unbelievable timing.
Yeah, I thank God for it. I don't want to get too religious, but yeah, it's just lucky. I mean, some things are lucky. You just can't help them. And yeah, I got really lucky that I got out of the gyms in end of 2019. Because I mean, yeah, I would have been not a happy camper if I was holding those in 2020.
I feel so bad for gym owners. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a a tough thing going on for them right now. I mean, they've got to be at like such a low capacity compared to what they used to be. Um, but
Gym
I'm like that.
owners, restaurants, travel, hair salons. Like
Yeah,
if you're in one of those four categories, I mean, you got screwed pretty much.
yeah,
Like it
yeah.
sucks.
So I'm the opposite of you. I have this ability to not make money on real estate. So I bought my first condo in 2005, which was
Ooh,
like the peak of the market, and then I sold it in 2011. So I'm like the anti Austin Hare when it comes to
that's funny.
timing. So just real quick, wakeboarding. How does a competition of wakeboarding go? Are you racing, or is it by style or
Yeah,
technique?
same thing as snowboarding. There's a couple different factors. Number one is like how hard is the trick. Number two would be how clean did you do it? Did you land it really well? Number three would be how well, like, did you grab it? How does the style look? How does your body form in the air? And number four would be how big do you go? So you kind of combine all four of those things together. And sometimes you can do a really technical trick, it's not very big. Sometimes you can do a really easy trick that's really, really big. And the best would be obviously doing a really technical trick that's really, really big. So there's a bunch of different factors that go into it, but I mean, snowboarding is more evolved than wakeboarding. So we're always looking to snowboarding, seeing what they were doing on X Games, the Olympics, and that sort of thing to up the standard for the judging and for the competition. So pretty much like I was a boat guy. Now you've got these cable parks everywhere, but I did both, but I focused on the boat. And how that would work is, I mean, it's crazy. Like we'd travel to Korea and we get 2 minutes on the water, or maybe five, but it'd be like, you get in you hop off the dock, boat turns around, you get 4 tricks going down, turn around, you get 4 tricks going back, and you're done. And hopefully make it to the next round and then make it to the next round. So at the most you're riding like 3 times, like 15 minutes. Sometimes if you fall first trick or something, I mean, you flew across the world and you were on the water for 30 seconds. But that's just how it is. Cause it's an individual sport. You got to cram a lot of people in there. It's kind of similar to Ninja Warrior, actually.
Did you hear a lot of bad jokes by the commentators, like you won by a hair?
Yeah, I heard that a lot. Barely made it by a hair.
Yeah, because I've heard them all. I've heard, my last name is Block, so H&R Block, New Kids on the Block,
Oh, that's funny.
Block Temp,
My
Mandibular
nickname
Block.
in elementary school, they called me Austin Harry, but so
That's
that was a fun
yeah,
one.
sounds about right for middle school.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into dentistry and dental real estate?
Yeah. So, so my partner he formed it. His own brokerage. We partnered on that. It's called Leaders Real Estate. Before that, he was with a company called Equity, and they really just focused. They realized there was this huge niche and this huge void in healthcare, and so we equate it to a lot of what was happening in the 50s and 60s with the fast food restaurants. So in the fast food industry, you had this consolidation back then, because before that, it was a bunch of mom and pop shops. They popped up wherever, like there was no such thing as fast food, right? And so then they realized, oh, this is a popular concept. People really like this. So they started conglomerating and they started forming like these massive big partnerships and big companies. And then they were taking up like the best real estate. So they did a lot of demographic data and research to find like, okay, this is the best spot. This is going to give us the highest probability of success. And that you saw that happening in the urgent care space later on, right? And so that's why urgent care started popping up all around, like on these, these big prominent retail intersections, these good street corners with great visibility from the road, and just stuff people were driving by, driving to the neighbors, the anchor tenants, stuff like that. And there's still not a lot of there's still plenty of urgent cares that don't do that, but in general, like that was a massive shift. And so then it was just like, okay, we need to take this strategy. We helped a lot of urgent cares do that, 10, 13 years ago, but it was like, we need to take the strategy to everybody in healthcare. I mean, we can do this in everything. And so dentistry, a lot of times are still located in office places in office plazas. And so, if you're already in an office, it's the most expensive cost to build per square foot of any industry. So you're not going to move, right? But it's more or less like helping people by giving them data ahead of time to make clear decisions, right? Because the more accurate your data, the better decisions you can make. Bad data leads to bad decisions. So it's just the process of like, okay, let's really help spell this out. So like, yeah, you've got a spot that's $3,000 a month. And it's an office, it's back somewhere, and you got a spot that's retail and it's $10,000 a month. It sounds like overwhelming because nobody wants to pay a fixed cost every single month. But if you break that down in terms of new patient acquisition and the dollars spent, like let's just say, it costs you $200 to acquire a new patient, and you're going to get 30 new patients a month. I'm making math really hard for myself, but like 30 times 200. I mean, you're gonna want to spend $6,000 a month in marketing, right? So if you can get more than 30 patients and spend less than $6,000 a month in rent, then you're net positive for the alternative. And so it sounds overwhelming because like your percentage of rent can double or triple. But when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, let's think about your overall percentage of your expenses. It's not really that much. It's maybe a 10% increase in your expenses, but what it can do, the top line revenue, there's plenty, there's so many times where you help somebody relocate and they double their top line revenue, right? Or at least increase it by 50%. So when you look at it in those terms, it makes those numbers a lot less scary. And, that's kind of what a big part of what our mission and our goal is.
Yeah, so you gotta evaluate all that data, and if you're choosing a location with like a juicy anchor store, or you're near like a Chick-fil-A or Chipotle with a lot of traffic, the rent or to purchase the unit may be higher, but you're also, that's like free marketing because all that foot traffic and traffic going to the anchor store, you're going to capitalize on, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we actually view rent as marketing. And Emmett Scott talks about that as well. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Emmett Scott, but he's done a great job in the DSO space. And so he just says like, yeah, your rent is your marketing dollars, like allocate that towards your marketing because it's going to offset your marketing if you get in a good spot. So you do pay for it, right? Like if you go to a location that's right next to Chick-fil-A and Chipotle and Starbucks and all these places, like, yeah, you're going to pay for that in rent, but you're also going to receive the benefit too. So, I mean, yeah, having anchor tenants is great. Like, I mean, we're seeing more and more dentists pop up in places that are next to like a big grocery store, like Publix or whatever. And, it's a trend that's not going to go away. And in fact, COVID has probably helped expedite that trend because a lot of times restaurants and bars were taking up that prime retail space and it wasn't available. I mean, we know people, I've talked to plenty of dentists who tried to get space in retail and they couldn't. Like the landlord didn't want to rent to them because it wasn't sexy, right? And they wanted to rent to these restaurants. And well, restaurants have a high fail rate anyways. And then that combined with COVID means an extremely high fail rate. And so now you're seeing landlords being a lot more open to the possibility, like, you know what? Maybe this isn't like as sexy. Maybe we're not going to get like the amount of volume of people that we would with a restaurant coming through here, but like we're still getting enough people and it's stable, and it's a stable business and it's not going to, crumble at a whim or downturn, in the economy like that.
Yeah, that's a good question about stability of the anchor store. Like, can you imagine, you know, back in the day, Blockbuster was a major anchor store, and I think the only Blockbuster left is like up in Alaska somewhere.
Oh, I didn't
Um,
even know there was one left. That's hilarious.
I think there's like one or two left, but
Wow.
so I used to live in South Florida, and there was every strip mall had, it was like, your classic anchor store, like a Publix. It had a pizza place. There was a dental office, a Chinese restaurant. It was like each strip mall had like, like a dry cleaner. It was like kind of the same thing, each
Like the
strip
same
mall.
model.
Yeah, same model. Um, so actually, let's go back. So you mentioned Emmett Smith and DSOs. Are DSOs versus like the solo practitioner more leaning towards purchasing than leasing? Is that more of a DSO model
Yeah,
versus like?
no, that's a good question. So, rent versus buy is a question that we get asked a lot. And even for myself, before I was in commercial real estate, when I was opening up the fitness centers, like I wanted to buy my own real estate too, because I don't want to throw my money away at rent. But it's not really, that's the slogan that you see on billboards for people that want to sell you houses, because you're not really throwing your money away. The first and most important question is the location. Okay. Where is the best location for me? That's what you should be asking yourself first, because your business is going to return you a much higher rate than real estate. So if you find the absolute perfect spot, there's less competition in this area. The daytime traffic looks great. The demographics are really good. It's high income. It's highly populated, all these types of things. And the only thing is available to rent, then rent. Now, of course, if there is nothing available to rent, there's only a building that's for sale and to buy, then I would say buy, right? Look at it through that lens first. Now, let's consider all those things are exactly equal. Okay. You've got everything is perfect. One of them was only, you have to rent. One of them you have to buy. Which one do you choose? Well, it depends. So your question about DSOs, in that case, the difference between a DSO and a solo practitioner is typically they're trying to grow, either through acquisition or de novo. And every single business is limited by the amount of capital that you have, right? It doesn't matter if you're a single operator, dental practice, or if you're Microsoft. Even Bill Gates said that he would like to have 12 months worth of operating cash in the bank before he felt safe, right? And he owns Microsoft. So um, with that lens, what are you going to do with the money that you're going to use to buy this building? So if this is, if you're going to be here for a long time and you want to, and you're not planning on opening up multiple locations, then yeah, buying the building is a great investment, because you're kind of diverse. You're diversifying in a sense, that like now you have your business and you also have your real estate, right? Now it's not as diversified as you might think, because the value of your real estate is actually tied to your business. A lot of people don't realize that, but as the primary tenant signing on the lease to the building, because the difference between commercial real estate and residential real estate is that commercial is driven by the value is driven by the lease, the quality of the tenant, the length of the lease, all that kind of stuff. Residential is 100% about location. It doesn't matter what kind of person lived in there or what kind of rent you're going to get, right? Like it's about the location. So empty building in commercial real estate is worth far, far less than a rented building. And a rented building from a single operator is worth far less than a massive DSO or a Starbucks or somebody that's accredited, that's doing more than $10 million a year in EBITDA, like in profit. So when you are a single operator and you buy the building for yourself, if your business starts to do not as well, and you got to close down or back out, whatever, sure, you'll own the building, but that building is not going to be worth that much unless you can get somebody doing equal or more revenue and profit every year than you were just in there. So it is a good form of diversification. It's not a great form of diversification, but it makes a lot more sense when you're a single operator, for sure. And if it's in a great spot, then it doesn't matter, because then if you have to leave for whatever reason, chances are you'll be able to fill that pretty quickly, right? Now, if you're trying to grow, if you got ambition to have multiple practices, like 4 or 5, 6, 10, you're a DSO, you want to do 100. Well, okay, I'm gonna have to come out of pocket to buy this real estate. Now, how much of that money would I be putting towards growing my business? Probably all of it, right? And the business typically will return you a 30 to 50% return on your money, or with stabilized real estate is going to look more like 10 or 11% over time, which 10 or 11% is great. And you can get more than that for sure, but chances are it's not going to be as high as you reinvesting in the business. So it's a really long way to answer a question it depends.
Yeah, well, I think it really depends on what that dentist goals and what type of practice they want. Is it urban? Is it suburban? Is it rural? Are they looking at a boutique type of cosmetic practice versus a high volume HMO? You have to figure out what your philosophy is, what your goals are. I like your advice on first the location, and then decide on whether you're looking for growth. If you're looking for growth, then maybe buying is the way to go. But let's just say I want to open up, I'm a solo practitioner, and I'm really just focusing on opening up my first office. And I just want to lease. And I found a great spot. There's a lot of pros and cons to buying versus leasing. When you're leasing and there's an issue, you can call the landlord to help you with maintenance. If you buy and you own it, you're the owner, then you have to take care of it. So there's a lot of pros and cons to owning versus leasing.
Yeah.
So I think it's especially with a solo practitioner, it really depends on what your goals are and what you're looking to do and your long-term vision. Is that really one of the first questions you get is, should I lease versus should I own? when a dentist comes to you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a really popular question for sure. And then up there, equal to that is just like, I want to go to the right spot, because that's hard. Like, there's when you pick the wrong location, I mean, this is a 10-year commitment, right? Like, you're getting married to this location. Well, marriage is, forever, but like, you know, it's like it's difficult. It's really difficult to move. And so we think it's funny. Like, there's a lot of times where we talk to people and they're just like, oh yeah, like, my cousin is a commercial real estate broker, so I'm just going to use him, or this is my golfing buddy, or this is my brother-in-law. And it's like, yeah, somebody in the commercial real estate space and they're a broker, and I get it. You want to help them. We all want to help people that we know, like, and love. But if they're not qualified in that industry and they don't have expertise in that industry, I mean, you are costing yourself tens, tens and tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, in the opportunity cost of picking the wrong location because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, right? And so, like, I mean, really, you should have somebody with expertise. And when I say expertise, I mean at a minimum 10 deals in that specific industry, specifically in dental, before you really trust them to find you the best location. Because that, like, a lot of times people are relying on brokers with limited experience to find them the best location. So they'll come to us and they'll just say, hey, how to help me find the best location, help me identify the best location. And we do a real deep dive with the competition evaluation and all the data. So, like, it's really easy if you live in an area and you're a local broker. It's really easy to think that you know everything. You have what's called location bias, and you may not physically drive the location. But nowadays, we've got so much technology at our disposal. It doesn't mean it's easy, right? Like, but our process is we'll physically drive to an area or fly to an area and then drive by all the locations, take pictures of everything, and then we cross-reference that with Google Maps. Because what most people do is they just go on to CoStar or LoopNet, which are two of the most popular commercial real estate sites with data, and they'll look for exactly what's available. And if it's listed on CoStar, okay, great, we'll present it. If it's not, then you won't even see it, right? So physically doing, like, the hard work, boots on the ground, taking pictures, cross-referencing that with Google Maps, and then if it's not available, if it's not on CoStar, then doing a search on the comptroller or the property appraiser to find out who actually owns it and getting in touch with them. And so that's how you really help these people find the best locations.
Yeah, I think it's so important for dentists to have, I have a dental specific CPA, a dental lawyer, that specializes in dentistry. Same thing with real estate. You need someone that's experienced in dentistry, because if not, like that example of Blockbuster. Okay, so that large unit that used to be a Blockbuster, they chopped it up into three different units. Um, but the plumbing, what about the plumbing? They maybe Blockbuster had one bathroom, so there's not enough plumbing to plumb a dental office. Those are the types of things that you need a dental specialist to be able to sniff out and make the right decision, because like you said, this could be a 10-year lease and you want to make sure that you've got the right location.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. I mean, at 100 up to $180 a square foot for the build out. I mean, that's an expensive commitment. That is an expensive mistake if you pick the wrong spot.
it is plumbing, like that example I gave, is plumbing and heat, air conditioning. Is that a major consideration when you're especially for a dental office? I mean, we're opening up multiple operatories. We need a lot of plumbing and suction power. Is that a major
Oh yeah,
thing to
yeah,
look into?
yeah. Exactly right. Exactly right. There's a lot of different factors that go in that are unique to dentistry that you don't have. Like, take a gym for instance. I mean, you need the bathroom, and other than that, you're just putting in equipment. It's very, very
Yeah.
easy. It's like a little, like, I'm talking about boutique fitness centers that you see popping up nowadays. You know what I mean? So there's a ton of infrastructure, a ton of construction work.
So what was the term? Is that the term HVAC or HVAC? What's the term for that?
HVAC, yeah, either one, HVAC, HVAC.
Yeah.
Yeah, both those. I mean, when you're dealing with that, the age of the unit is going to be what's most important, right? So when you're looking
Yeah.
at leasing, if it's older than 10 years, then a lot of times landlords will try and push on to the tenant, like, the full responsibility. That's something that you can push back on. Like, it, you can, if it looks like it's been there for a long time or it doesn't look like it's fully healthy, you don't want to get stuck having to pay for that. If it's brand new,
Mhm.
I mean, chances are you're not going to replace it. Won't matter. But, like, sometimes, and that just depends. You got to comb through those leases. You got to look at it and find out what the specific landlord has in there.
Okay, so location. What about signage? Personally, we're in a professional office building where we really don't have much signage at all. Our practice has been around a long time, so we get a lot of referrals from inside referrals and word of mouth. None from our signage because it's so small, and the town that we're in is very strict with the signage. However, across the street there's a Dunkin' Donuts, which has this enormous Dunkin' Donuts sign, and it's directly across the street. So when people drive by, they're going to look left at that Dunkin' Donuts and not right at our and look at our little sign. How important is signage for like a new office, a new practitioner that's opening up their office to get that drive by traffic?
It's very important. I mean, it could be a deal breaker, right? So like that's one of the first things that we look at. You look at drive-by traffic, walk-by traffic, anchor tenant, signage availability. All those things are what you're going to take into consideration because yeah, if you got a great spot, but they don't, there's a code that doesn't allow you to have a big sign in your building or doesn't allow you to have like a roadway sign, it's not going to be as valuable, right? That you might be overpaying in rent because people aren't going to notice it. So yeah, making sure that you've got adequate signage. And now adequate again is another term. It depends, right? Like, are there trees obstructing the view? Or is it wide open? There's a lot, like those are all going to be situational depending on the site. But yeah, if you don't have a big enough sign, like either on the roadway or on the building or both, I mean, that could kill a deal, definitely.
Hmm. Now, as you get into better signage and better locations like that, with visibility, does it typically get more expensive? But is it worth it? Is that extra expense worth that free marketing?
Yeah, so surprisingly, the signage doesn't really affect the price that much. I mean, there are exceptions to that, but a lot of times it's just going to be based on the demand for that area, like the demographic data, like how busy it is, how popular that retail space is. So, you might find a place that has everything that you want, but the sign's really small, and then there might be a place like down the road. It's got the exact same price. It's also got everything you want, and it's got great signage. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things like you just gotta if there's a lot of restrictions around the signage and what you can put on there, like it might be a deal breaker. But if it's a great spot and it's a great location, then really pushing to get a bigger sign or an adequate sign is something that you can oftentimes negotiate for.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, in your evaluation, do you look at the data points of drive-by traffic or drive-through traffic, and are those two very different things?
Yeah, they're different. We have a saying we like to say, which is drive to or drive through, right? So like a Publix, a grocery store, those are drive to locations. Like a Dunkin' Donuts, that might be a drive through where like you would pass by it. Not gonna be as many people going to a Dunkin' Donuts, even though it's like noticeable as there are a grocery store. You're actually gonna park there. You're gonna be spending a lot more time, right? You're gonna be walking around, stuff like that. So again, either one is always right or always wrong. It's just different variables to look at. And what another metric in the data is like, we might say, depending on the town, depending on your specific niche, but population of like 1,000 people to one dentist office or 2,000 people to one dentist office in that niche. Like if you do pediatrics or if you're a PPO, if you focus on Medicare, Medicaid, those are all three like very separate industry, like very separate target demographics, right? So you can afford to have multiple ones of those in an area. But yeah, like a lot of times people, healthcare operators will say like that they are not competition. Like we don't have competition. We're very very unique, and it's kind of true. But it's going to. There's only so many people that can come do business with you. So it's really fleshing out like, okay, how many. That's what the competition evaluation is. That's what the analysis is like getting a real pragmatic, not an emotional, but a logical, data-driven, analytical way to look at, all right, this makes sense or doesn't make sense based on the number of competitors that we have.
Okay. What about? I found a great location, and there's I guess what you would call a synergistic business where, let's say I'm a pediatric dentist, but there's also a pediatrician in the building. I mean, that seems like a slam dunk, right? Because you're getting a lot of the same. You can get a lot of referrals from the pediatrician if you're a pediatric dentist in the same building.
Oh yeah, yeah, something like that would be a slam dunk. Absolutely, yeah. You've got, like you said, a synergistic user where you guys really help each other. Other examples of synergistic users would be like um, a restaurant, normal restaurant, maybe like a casual dining restaurant. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Tijuana Flats, like a Mexican kind of place, and then like an ice cream store or a froyo place or a shaved ice place, right? Like those would be very synergistic because you could go eat at one and then you could go do dessert at the other one, and neither of them are too expensive. A lot of times it could just be like a non-synergistic user would be if you're a dental office and there's a tattoo parlor right next door, or there's a liquor store, right? Like liquor stores and tattoo parlors are synergistic. That's fine. They go well together, but they wouldn't go as well with a dental office. You know what I mean? So yeah, looking for those businesses that are cotangent. They would serve a lot of the same avatar, a lot of the same target audience of what you serve, but they're not taking away from your bread and butter.
Like even I guess a primary care office or an urgent care. Um, those patients that go into their urgent care or primary care, they're going to also need a dentist as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. Yeah.
so,
Primary care, urgent care, family practice. Those are all very synergistic users with dental.
so I wanted to talk about, and I'm very into helping dentists in their mental health and their stress, because some dentists just don't want to deal with all the headaches that go along with owning um, the building. So there is a lot of pros and cons, and you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. I used to work in an office, and the dentist that owned the office moved from this uh, kind of like a second floor of a strip mall. It didn't have great location. She ended up moving the practice to a really central location on a very busy main street in the town that her practice is in. But and she got a ton of new patients just from the signage. But the amount of stress that I saw her go through with all the maintenance issues, the elevator didn't work, the roof was leaking, all these things that she didn't expect and wasn't prepared for, um, caused a tremendous amount of stress on her. So um,
Did you say she
that
had to buy that building?
she
Or
bought it,
okay.
and she also had two extra units, so she rented out to other tenants. I think she had a dermatologist in there and another office building that she was renting out. And one of the spots was empty for a year. So that's another thing to consider is, you have the space to rent out, but you have to find that tenant. And if not, if you don't have that tenant, can you cover the mortgage, by yourself? So there's a lot of factors to plan. Um, so can you explain, let's say I've decided to lease, is there a lot of negotiation that can go on with a lease? And can you walk us through that process?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's like anything. The longer you do things, the more real world experience you get, the more you get burned a lot of times. And so the longer your lease will get. So landlords that have been doing this a long time, like they might have really complicated leases. And same thing with dental users. You might have a really complicated lease, a lot of specific things you're looking for if you've been doing it for a long time too. Chances are the landlord has been doing this longer than the dentist. So, there are so it does take a while. We talked about HVAC earlier, like depending on the size of the unit, or sorry, the age of the unit, you might want to make a stipulation in there. You're only responsible for X amount. Maybe that's $500. Maybe that's $1,000. But anything over that, that's going to be the landlord's responsibility. There's a lot of little things in there, like just maintenance with bathrooms and stuff like that. Everybody's got their own preferences. But some of the things that you can push for is like your TI and your rent, and knowing the landlord's goals, knowing what they're trying to do personally will help you negotiate. So let's just say, for example, you've got a landlord who is a little bit older and they've had the building for a long time and they are not looking to sell. They just want a good tenant who's going to pay on time and not be a whole lot of headache for them. They're kind of getting towards their retirement years. Well, gonna they're not going to want to give you a whole lot of tenant improvement money, right? They're not going to want to come out of pocket a whole lot of money. They would rather just pay, even if you got to pay a little bit less in rent, because when you get tenant improvement, you got rent, right? And these are like balancing equations. So like the more tenant improvement that the landlord gives you, the higher your rent's going to be, right? It's like taking out an advancement. It's like taking out a loan when you are the tenant leasing the building. And so if the landlord has just purchased the building and they're looking to sell it, like they're looking to fill the space with you and then sell that building immediately for the highest return, well, they might be a lot more willing to give you high tenant improvement because that is going to increase the rent that you're paying. And the rent that you're paying is actually what dictates the value of the building through the cap rate, like we talked about earlier. So the more rent that you pay, the lower your cap rate, which increases the price of the building. It's complicated math. I mean, we can go through it if you want to. It takes a little bit to explain, but essentially just know that when they're, when they're trying to flip it, when they're trying to sell it, you can have a little bit of leverage getting some more TI if you're okay paying that rent.
So TI, would that include the build out of a dental office and plumbing and,
Yep.
because that's building out a dental office is like you're totally changing that unit.
Yeah.
It's not like you can, just resell that to a pizza place after if the dentist leaves. It's a total, build out. Is that what you would call TI?
Yeah, tenant improvement, anything that you got to do to the building at all to get it ready. So, yep, all like everything that you just mentioned. And so, there's a little bit of a premium that you pay for it. Like if let's just say, for example, they're giving you $150,000. The landlord is giving the tenant $150,000 in TI. Well, they probably are going to borrow that money hypothetically, and let's just say they're paying 3% interest, 4% interest. Well, they're going to want to make a little bit of a spread on that, so they might, with that, the calculations pan out, you might be paying 7 or 8% interest, which is high for sure, but there's the benefit to not having that on your credit, to not pulling out more money in the loan from banks or wherever. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more simple and straightforward.
So all the specifics of what you negotiated, that goes in the LOI, and that's basically like your contract, correct?
Yeah, I mean, LOIs, you can have simple or complicated LOIs. It's not, nothing's contractual, nothing's certain until you actually sign a lease. So like an LOI
Mhm.
will go back and forth, and some people, they might just send you. So like, if your area is in high demand as a landlord, and the tenant knows that, and the tenant might have an incentive to send them a simple LOI just so it can be really quick, and they might be a little bit more flexible with like they might be willing to pay a little bit more, have less demands because like that building is in high demand and somebody else might come and take it. Versus like if it's not and you have multiple locations, if you're a user that's looking at 4 or 5 different locations, you might send them, and you're happy with going to either of them, you might send them a very complicated LOI that's got everything you want. And that way, whoever comes back the most agreeable to your terms, you can have the benefit of the selection and being like, okay, of these 4 places I sent in a complicated LOI to, only really 1 or 2 of them came back with meeting our requirements that we asked for. And then you can move on. And then once you got to go through the LOI a lot. And then when everything is finalized, then that would become the lease. And once the lease is signed, then, you're in at that stage.
Do you actually recommend that I find maybe 4 or 5 locations and negotiate with each landlord and just pick the best
Oh yeah.
situation for me?
Yeah. Be flexible about where you want to go. Because like, again, we talked about location bias earlier. You might think because you live in a certain area, drive by a certain area, like this is the one spot that I got to go to. I got to be on this intersection of Main and First. But it's like, well, there's a high probability that there are multiple other locations in your city that have equal or better demographics. So identifying those trade areas, maybe they're maybe it's a 3-mile radius, or maybe it's a couple areas within the 3-mile radius. But if you're flexible, and like the bigger you can kind of make your radius to an extent, you don't want to overwhelm yourself, but the bigger you can kind of make your radius of places that you're willing to go, the higher the probability of finding a good spot that meets your demographic requirements. And then, send out those people a bunch of different LOIs, especially if your timing is a little bit flexible. Like you're not trying to, you don't need to open 10 this year or whatever. Then you can have time to work through all that.
Okay, so you already said the word side hustle, and I like to say the word side hustle at least once a podcast, because I'm a big advocate of dentists having other endeavors and other things going on than just the dental office. Mainly because if all you have is just the dental office, then that's where your mental energy is focused, and it can be cause a lot of burnout and stress. So if you have other things going on, other businesses, other endeavors, it's a great distraction from the stresses of the dental office. Having said that, is real estate a risky side hustle for dentists to look for some other passive income? Do you have you heard a lot of stories of dentists getting involved with real estate and then losing money? What have you heard and what do you recommend?
Yeah, I don't know that I've heard a ton of stories of them getting involved and losing money per se, but you talk about mental bandwidth, and you talk about like your emotional quality of life and that sort of thing. And so you have to weigh that because that's a personal decision that you're going to make. But yeah, with real estate, and I really like to distinguish between side hustle and passive income because those can be separate. Like a side hustle can give you income, but if you're hustling it, it's not really passive, right? And so I think two good examples are residential real estate versus commercial real estate. Like, so with residential real estate, that's definitely a side hustle. A lot of people like to call that passive income because you're making the same amount of money no matter what each month if it's rented, but it's not passive at all, in my opinion. It's like a little mini business because if you've got one single house that you're renting out, I mean, you're not going to have a maintenance crew. You're not going to have a property manager, probably. Maybe you will, but you're going to be the person who's leasing that out. You're going to be the person who's looking for new rentals. You're going to be the person who's calling the handyman or physically doing it yourself. And that's work. There's a lot of effort involved. And so that is definitely more of a side hustle. And you can make money, but is it really worth your time? Right. Like, I think it's a great starting point, especially for people who are younger. But as you get older, I think it becomes less and less appealing. And then you've got commercial real estate, which is where it's a lot higher capital requirement. It's a lot more difficult to break in that game. But if you got a single tenant, triple net lease, then the tenant is largely responsible for all the maintenance because that's their business, right? Like, they're going to be figuring all that stuff out. And you might have to pay maybe sometimes out of pocket a little bit, but you're not going to have to be calling the handyman to be the mediator. And when people live in a building, a lot of times it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more emotional for them if it's their house than if it's like their business that they operate. And they're just going to do a good job of keeping that up to snuff, right? So it's a lot more passive, in my opinion, when you do commercial. And then if you really want to make it passive, I mean, you can invest in income funds. And income funds are a great way to diversify because you could be looking at, 10, 11, 12%. Like, a lot of times when you're developing a property for a accredited user as a landlord or a real estate investor, I mean, you can make significant upside, and it's very easy to pay out 10, 11%. So it might seem risky, like, how am I going to give these guys money and they can guarantee me that I get 11%, annually every single year? And it might not be a guarantee, but it'll be very easy for them because they're the ones doing the work. They're the ones originating these deals. They're the ones building the relationships. And it's not very hard for them to pay somebody 11%, 12% to be able to use their money to go lock down all these buildings. And that would be like, that's a truly passive way to make the money. Now, again, you might not be receiving all of the upside, but you're not having any mental energy, right? It's not affecting your day to day. It's not taking away time from your family. It's not clouding your thoughts at night. And then there's also kind of like a fourth option, which is where you could be a limited partner. And that would just be you invest in an individual deal, right? So if a person, a developer, if they've got an opportunity where they're going to buy the building and they already have the tenant lined up, or maybe they just got the building really cheap, well, then you could put up the money or most of the money. And then you'd also, if the building doesn't do well, you wouldn't make any money. But if it does well, then you participate in the upside, and the upside can be a lot, right? Like, you could get a 14% annual return. You could get a one-time 40% return or a, 60, 70% return over 2 years, right? If you're selling the building. So there's a couple of different ways that you can slice that. And I hope I'm not making a simple question more complicated than it needs to be.
No, I just wanted to back up for a second. You mentioned the words triple net lease. I think that's what we have in our lease. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, I mean, in is like what the tenant pays. So it covers like all of the additional expenses. So when you're looking at renting a building, you got your price per square foot, and then you've got the in. And so that's like the taxes and the maintenance and the insurance and that sort of thing. And so they're paying for all that. And then to an extent, they might be responsible for those things. But like, generally, like the landlord, they're going to have a property maintenance crew that goes out there and does all of the realist, like the landscaping. Maybe they'll throw a new coat of paint on there every once in a while. And if something major or structurally happens, like, they got to do that. But the tenant pays, essentially is paying for all that. And then anything that's like on a smaller scale that's within the business, then the tenant will be responsible for that. So like HVAC, that'll depend on your lease, like we talked about earlier. But if it's something major that goes on with the HVAC because it's been there a long time, then that would be something that you would call the landlord to fix.
So, and all that's negotiable, correct?
Yeah, yeah, everything's negotiable. I mean, there are certain things that are industry standard, but you should be able to negotiate at least a little bit of that.
So why is it triple? And is there a double net lease?
Well, it pretty much means taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Known
Okay,
as CAM. So yeah,
gotcha. Okay. All right. Austin, thanks so much. Again, Austin Hare from Orlando, Florida. He is a partner at Leaders Real Estate and the Real Estate University. And again, you can go to Deals for Dentists and check out the promo offer of a free vulnerability analysis. So, Austin, thanks so much for joining us. And did you have any last nuggets or words of wisdom for the young dentists out there?
yeah. I mean, right now we are seeing buildings pop up because of COVID that weren't available a while ago. So if you don't have a location yet, or you're looking to get a second location, once a month, try and scout the area, try and look through, because there are restaurants that are going out of business every month, unfortunately, but that's creating deals for places that were not previously available in grade A, primary retail spots that are now going to be available. So yeah, if you're looking in a certain area, keep driving by, just keep looking, be opportunistic about it. We're happy to help people do that as well. I mean, we're in Orlando, Florida, but we've done deals in 46 states. So yeah, with COVID going on and the closures and all that sort of thing, just be opportunistic and don't write a location off just because it's occupied. Do your homework, do your due diligence, and keep checking in on it.
That's great advice. And network. Keep on networking.
Yeah.
The more contacts you have, the more options you have. So, all right, Austin, let's be in touch. Thanks so much for your time.
Hey, you're welcome, man. It was my pleasure. Happy to do it.
All right, we'll be in touch. Take care.
Bye bye.